Hello, this is Pastor Josh, and this is the view from my chair. A few weeks back, I showed you this owl that lives down the ravine, and I caught him a couple of days ago hanging out on the tree. What I wanted to show you, though, was here in a few seconds, he's going to fly off, and you get a chance to see just how big this guy is. There he goes. Super cool. Getting to see that aspect of God's creation always causes me to be grateful for the chance to look out here at the view from my chair. But the more important view, as always, is the view into God's Word. And so today we're looking at Hosea chapter 8, Hosea chapter 5, verses 8 through 15. If you remember the context that we've been exploring here, we've had the picture of Hosea and Gomer's marriage is the metaphor that frames really chapters 1 through 3. The unfaithfulness of Gomer parallels with the unfaithfulness of Israel. And then in chapter 4, the scene changes to a courtroom, God's case against Israel. And that really goes from Hosea 4:1 through 5:7. And as we turn to chapter 5, verse 8, Hosea 5:8, we see the scene changing once again. And this time it is the context of battle. That's the metaphor. There is a war cry in Beth Aven. The ram's horn is blown in Gibeah. The battle sets the stage for what will come in 8 through 15 of chapter 5. This is the same story, though. These are all connected, marriage to the courtroom to the battle. This is all God's case against Israel. And what we are going to see in this particular section, using this battle metaphor, is that the judgment is being announced. The ram's horn was blown to call the people to attention, and here it is the Lord announcing what is certain. This is the word for truth in Hebrew, announcing what is true among the tribes of Israel. What follows is a series of pictures of God's judgment. In verse 10, his fury is poured out like water. This is evoking the image of water as a picture of God's judgment. And so you can think about the flood during Noah's day. The undoing of creation order was often depicted as a flood. But alongside of that picture of water is the picture of rot or decay or illness. If the picture of water expresses the encompassing nature of God's judgment, it surrounds and fills and even drowns its victim. The image of decay or rot depicts the slow creeping aspect of God's judgment, like termites chewing up the structure of a wall. From the outside, it might look fine, but on the inside, it is about to collapse. And so it is with God's judgment. It might be imperceptible at times, and yet it is effective in bringing about destruction. But then there's one more picture of God's judgment, that it is like a lion, a young lion. Here, the lion is on the hunt, and he's going to tear to pieces his victim and carry off the carcass for devouring. Here, the slow creeping aspect of God's judgment is now overtaken by a violent, bloody depiction of God's judgment. You can imagine yourself coming face to face with one of these fierce creatures. There's no slowness or creeping to it. There's just immediate dread at the thought of a violent and inescapable death. It's rather uncomfortable to think about God's judgment in this way, and these three pictures are hard to escape. But the news gets worse before it gets better. Whereas in chapter 4, God's judgment looked like him leaving Ephraim alone because they are attached to idols and Because of their actions, the people cannot return. That's Hosea 4:17 and Hosea 5:4. These seem to depict God's judgment against sin as impersonal, such that the sin causes a reaction in a cause and effect kind of a way. But here in chapter 5, verses 8 through 15, God's judgment is very personal, very painfully personal. I will pour out my fury on them like water. I am like rot to Ephraim, like decay to the house of Judah. I am like a lion to Ephraim, like a young lion to the house of Judah. The emphasis here on that first person personal pronoun is inescapable. C.H. Dodd was a New Testament scholar who popularized the idea that the wrath of God was merely an impersonal reality, that it would just be anthropomorphic to say that God was angry or wrathful in the face of sin. However, the picture that we see here in Hosea is a very stark difference. This is a God who is wrathful in response to sin. And in fact, it is necessary. If his love did not exhibit itself again in wrath against sin, then he would not truly be a love. We have to remember that God's wrath is different than ours. It is not capricious. It is not like a child losing his temper. God's wrath is his settled determination to ensure justice and holiness and righteousness. But all of this raises the question of what will happen in the face of God's wrath. What can be done? The good news is, as we look forward in Hosea, we see that God is not done. Hosea chapter 11, verse 8, "How can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I surrender you, Israel? How can I make you like Admah? How can I treat you like Zeboim? I have had a change of heart. My compassion is stirred. I will not vent the full fury of my anger. I will not turn back to destroy Ephraim. For I am God and not man, the Holy One among you. I will not come in rage." As we turn to the New Testament, we see the answer to this dilemma of God's wrath. And though he has settled a covenant relationship with his people Israel and with all of humanity, how is it that sinful humanity can relate to this holy God in light of his very personal wrath? Well, the answer shows up in Jesus. In Romans chapter 3, verse 24 and 25, we read that God presents Jesus as a propitiation, that is a sacrifice that turns aside the wrath of God, so that God might be the just justifier of sinners like you and me. This is good news indeed, and worth celebrating and teaching. The wrath of God is indeed personal, but it helps us to understand the very personal nature of his mercy towards us. May God bless you as you point people to both.